Most of my videos are going to be about exotic science topics, ancient history, the theory of evolution, things of that nature. This one's about prize fighting and the question of Gennadyevich Golovkin, triple G. Gennadyevich means son of Gennady, so it's Gennady Jr. And the question of who you compare this guy to. And I'm seeing a number of different names thrown around. I get the impression that most of the people in the fight game and in the boxing world, boxing fans, have figured out at this point that Golovkin is the real deal. Pretty much. The question is, who do you compare him to? And in the time that I've been watching boxing, there's only one prize fighter that I've ever seen that I would compare Golovkin to, and that's going to be Duran. And that goes back a long time. I got spoiled for watching boxing, watching Duran. In other words, I haven't really been able to get much out of watching prize fights since the 1970s and early 80s. But there's some terribly interesting comparisons between Golovkin and Duran, and it's not just punching power and it's not just technique or anything like that. Their defensive skills are similar. Um, the defensive skills of both fighters are are or were economical of motion. In other words, you don't see this sort of wild flexing from the waist that you used to see with Muhammad Ali. Both guys got hit with all kinds of glancing shots, but almost never get hit with anything solid, so that they could go quite a ways. In other words, they're not expending any huge amount of energy, not getting hit. Duran was able to box effectively until he was in his late 30s, early 40s, doing that, which is sort of ridiculous. In fact, Duran, even well past the point that he was capable of fighting, first tier prize fights, was fun to watch, right? He could stand right in front of somebody and never get hit. I mean, just fighting club fighters, who were in there just so they could tell their grandchildren they'd been in the ring with Duran. Both fighters combine marvelous footwork with major league punching power, which is extremely rare. Golovkin's punches all sound heavy, and this is because he is always in position to throw heavy punches accurately. Okay, and this is footwork. Duran's footwork was the same kind of a thing, although it involves a couple of differences. Duran's warm-ups used to include something which you would normally figure was completely impossible, which would be like Cossack dances with a jump rope. In other words, thighs parallel to the ground, kicking his feet out, and then start doing that with a jump rope, start to switch the rope until the rope got to be just a blur, and keep that up for 5 or 10 minutes. Guys would watch that. And the question you'd hear was, could Baryshnikov do that? He might not have been coordinated enough. I don't think there's anybody else that's ever come along who could do that. Duran's footwork involved something else which you'd have to watch to notice, but he was usually had weight on the instep of that right foot, the trailing foot. That said that he could push off on the right foot the way skaters do. So that, in other words, some of his foot motion looked like ice skating. It looked like the way hockey skaters skate. He was able to close distances very quickly doing that. He was the ultimate nightmare to your dance and stick artists. Guys like Ray Robinson or Ray Leonard, normally count on being faster and more mobile than a puncher or a slugger. Duran was a highly intelligent puncher with lethal power in both hands. The ability to use not only the power itself, but the people's reaction to it. People constantly ducking punches which hadn't really been thrown, and then getting their heads taken off as they tried to untangle themselves. And he could cut distance very quickly. That second punch that he hit Leonard with in the second round of that brawl in Montreal, very few fighters would have been close enough to Leonard for that second punch to land. Okay, that was the same kind of thing that I'm talking about. I don't see that in Golovkin. Golovkin's footwork is mainly about balance, being in position to throw heavy punches. Okay, he does close distances, but not quite as quickly as Duran. There's another thing that I used to notice about Duran, which is the fact that he kept that right hand loaded up, right? He kept the right hand close to his face, and the idea was that that he wasn't ever going to get clocked with any kind of a left hook, and that people didn't see that right hand being loaded up. In other words, it stayed loaded up. It was like looking down the barrel of a loaded gun. You know, you normally see a right-handed fighter load a right hand up a little bit before throwing it, and that's usually enough time. I mean, most fighters can get out of the way of something like that. Duran landed an unusual no percentage of those right hands. This was the thing that I'm talking about. I don't see that in Golovkin. Golovkin misses more right hands than Duran ever missed. There are a number of other comparisons like that. Duran kept the right hand loaded, and he was constantly looking in. In other words, the opponent was watching that loaded right hand. And there were all kinds of ways to hit the person with a left hook, either high or low. Duran's normal combination involved 3 punches: left jab, a straight right, and then a left hook, usually to the liver area. Golovkin, like I say, he has most of these kinds of things. I mean, he doesn't have all of everything that Duran used to do, but he's got a couple of things that Duran didn't have. Golovkin has got murderous combinations of uppercuts and then hooks. And he's got a hook with his right hand, which Duran didn't have. And again, just the murderous punching power in combination with the footwork and the kinds of skills that you get with 200 or 300 amateur fights. And I don't have any sort of a mental picture of anybody Golovkin's size beating him anytime soon. The only real question is whether or not he could take somebody like Andrew Ward. Anybody else 155, 160 pounds is basically just in over their heads trying to take the guy on. There are a couple of intangible things that you see with Golovkin. They add up to something. I mean, one is the fact that the guy's other sport that you read about is competitive swimming. And that says that he's not ever going to get tired. I mean, you talk about second winds. I mean, this is going to put him into the same category as Duran as far as second wind. Duran, as a child, was swimming across shark-infested water to a plantation of some sort on an island, and coming back with fruit for his family, right, and then have to fight to keep the fruit when he got back. So I mean, that's some of, in other words, sort of like a macho fairy tale or something like that. Golovkin, I think you're looking at, very similar proposition. You're looking at just, murderous power and, the brains and the mentality to use it. I mean, Duran is like nobody's fool. He's a very bright guy, right? But I mean, Golovkin, you're looking at somebody, this is the other intangible thing. You're looking at somebody that speaks 7 or 8 languages, so that, when you start looking at IQ, then you've got like another kind of an edge against anybody else that you would figure to be in prize fighting. So, like I say, I mean, that's basically the comparison.